Hi everyone, it's Lou Collins for CraftStash. Today I want to focus on one die and show you 3 different ways of using it. This star shape here, this from the fixtures and fittings range from Textures, is absolutely perfect for all of your masculine makes, but it's also ideal for Christmas as well, which I'll explain to you in a little while. Now these are just some of the dies that are in the fixtures and fittings collection, just so you can have a glance at them, but you'll find them all linked down below. This is the die that we are working on today. It's a nice large die. You're going to need your larger format die cutting machines for it. We're going to be cutting different materials and creating totally different looks with it. So stay tuned for that. So first I'm going to show you how to put this together in the basic way, how it's intended to be. I've die cut this from gold mirror card. You can see you've got all the score lines there, the rivet marks as well, that cross hatching there for that metal look. It looks fantastic. Now this can not only be used for your birthday cards, anniversary cards, Father's Day cards, it can also be used at Christmas time as well. So it is a really versatile die set. So you can see it's the one die and it cuts everything out, scores everything in one pass. Like I say, this is just some mirror card here. I'm going to actually treat this. I'm going to do some decoration on it before I fold it for you, but folding is really simple. You can see all the lines we need to go along. So all I'm going to do, and this is quite unusual on mirror card, is I'm going to actually do a little bit of embossing. Now the idea is that some of this embossing will stick, some of it will kind of flake away a little bit, and it's not going to be a perfect solid emboss or heat emboss over the entire image. So I'm going with a distress oxide and I'm just going to stamp over very roughly a few areas with the oxide. I'm not going for full coverage here, I'm just going for sort of dot and dab, a few little areas, that's all. I'm then going to remove, this is just a mat I place underneath to stop my mat getting any messier than it already is. I've got a black embossing powder here and I'm going to sprinkle this over. I'm not so worried about the tabs, just really the star shape here. And the reason I use a water-based ink there is because that will kind of pool on the surface as well. So at this stage what I can do now is I can just brush away any powder that I don't want on there. So on the tabs I can remove that, and if I've got any sharp lines, which I have a little bit just from the edges of the pad, and I can just tap them with my finger, this is just going to kind of loosen up those lines a little bit, like so. There we go, a little bit more around there. So really just distressing this, not giving it, like I say, full coverage. Okay, so I'm quite happy with how much I've got there. That's going to give that a really distressed metal look. I'm now going to pop this back into my tub and heat set the star. Now something we need to bear in mind is that the heat from the heat gun onto the metallic, the mirror card, can affect the foiled surface of the card as well, and you can get some bubbling. So you need to decide whether you are happy for that bubbling to happen to give you extra texture, or whether you'd rather keep a smooth surface. So I'm going to hold my heat gun a little bit further away and allow for quite a slow melt of the embossing powder, just so I don't get too much direct heat onto the mirror card. There, now that powder has melted, I've really distressed the surface and it will look fabulous when the star is built, which is what we're going to do now. So to build the star, all we need to do is fold along each of the lines. So there's a score line that runs from the end of each point to the center of the opposite edge. So let's just fold that. Now because we've done our heat embossing, you might get a little bit of cracking along each of those lines, a little bit more than you would normally rather than just a fold, but that's fine because that cracking will potentially could loosen some of the embossing powder. Some bits might flake off, but I really like that effect. I like the fact that the embossing is kind of dimensional then. You've got little bits lifting here and there. I just really like it for a distressed look. And at the moment I'm just doing mountain folds on each one of them. So I've done a mountain fold on the peak of each of the stars. Now what I'm going to do is pinch into a mountain fold one of the peaks and just gently fold into a valley the opposite one. So this can take a few minutes to work around. So just working each of these smaller folds into a valley and the ones next to it are into a peak. And we want to try and aim for the center being a nice crisp kind of point as well, as we're squeezing each one in. There we go. So already we can start to see our star coming to life. Now these tabs on the edge can now be folded twice. So you've got the small tab there and you've got the larger triangle. They both need to be folded into mountains, because what's going to happen is this is going to fold round, and for the 3D star you're going to fold that and tuck it under the point, bringing that into the three-dimensional shape there. So we're going to do this on each of the points. There we go. Now your star is going to hold its shape once you glue these tabs on. I like to use hot glue for speed, but you can use something like red liner tape if you prefer. I'm just going to start at any one of these points and I'm going to run a small bit of hot glue along the tab and quite quickly fold that over onto the underside of the point on the other side, lining up the two edges. I always just pull away any excess glue, pinch it for a moment. And now we've created a point that is holding its own shape, and we can work around all 5 of the points like this. And once all 5 of your points are created, you can then glue these 5 points onto your project for a gorgeous 3D star that's been distressed. You don't have to do the distressing. It can simply be a gold star if you are doing this for Christmas time, but it's very easy to now attach this just with a few blobs of glue. And that will hold its shape on a card. Obviously you're going to want to make something like a box for this, but you can also make 3-dimensional stars even bolder, even more dimensional, simply by gluing 2 of these back to back so that you can see all the way around the star. That's perfect if you want to make a hanging for a Christmas tree. So there's one way of using this star. I'm going to now show you another way. This time I've cut 3 of the stars, one from orange cardstock, one from navy blue and one from yellow. I'm snipping off the tabs, so we're not needing these tabs at all. We're actually going to end up with a flat star shape that you could just adhere directly to your project if you didn't want to go with the dimension. There we go. So there's a star you could use on your project quite easily. Now you can also paper piece this star if you wish to give it some additional colour and shading. So you could take 2 shades of the same colour. So I could take a darker orange or a light brown here, and I could actually cut out this triangle shape, each of the hatched ones, and replace that or paper piece over a slightly darker shade to give that kind of depth and dimension look without it needing to be raised up off the card at all. But for this card, I'm actually going to do something very different. So as you can see here, I've actually taken my stars and I've trimmed them into diamond shapes. Now you could also trim them into the triangles that are there too and make up patterns with those, but I'm going to make up a pattern with the diamonds instead. Now I've laid out onto my card as many as I can fit on with the 3 stars that I cut in a pretty random pattern here. I haven't followed any particular colours, I've just laid them, trying not to get any next to each other too close that are the same colour. I'm going to glue these down, trim off the edges, and then those edge pieces hopefully will just fit in the small bits that I'm missing. So for this I'm going to use my Creative Craft Products bookbinding glue. I'm just going to space these out a little. Now I've got my pattern, I don't want to lose it. And I'm going to just place one in the centre. And from there I'm going to start working outwards. There we go, everything is glued down. This is onto a 6 by 6 inch card base. So you can see I've got lots of excess and overlap here. So I'm just going to carefully go along and trim off from the underneath so I can clearly see where the edge of the card is. And using these excess pieces, I'm just going to fill in the gaps that I have left. Now with the last space, I actually need the shorter point of an orange diamond shape, and I don't have that. I have the longer point, or I have these two, but these are actually two opposite halves. So I'm going to cut down the center of each of them. And then they should both fit side by side to fill that space in there. So now I've created my own patterned paper background. You can do this in any colours you like. You could actually make it so that the colours flow and fall equally, so you could do each row in a separate colour, however you prefer. But it's just a really fun way and unusual way of using that star die. For this third technique, I'm going to create a shaker card. So I've actually cut the die from acetate. I did use a metal shim in with the cutting sandwich so that I got a really clean cut against the acetate. I've glued this together in the same way as you saw with the gold star. So folded it in the same way. I've glued the tabs under. Now I have used a thin red liner tape, which you can just about make out on the edges, but it's the clearest glue that I had that was going to not really show too much. Now I'm going to go on to a lightly patterned paper, and in this case it's going to be a wood grain style backing paper, something like this, maybe some stripes and polka dots, nothing that detracts too much from the elements inside your shaker, but something that's going to essentially hide the glue, so that can't be seen too much. So this is what I'm going to be using as my backing, but before I do the backing I need to choose some elements to go in the shaker, and I've actually dug out all of my metal embellishments. So I have some really fun items in here that will be perfect for masculine cards. So I have often gone to the really cheap stores and purchased things like tiny little washers that come in bags of say 20. They are perfect for going in shakers, using on men's cards, things like this. So I'm going to dig out all of my little excess pieces like so and pop those inside my star, which is essentially, I've kind of got almost a little cup here, little pocket. So I'm going to place them in there. I'm going to try and wiggle as much as I can down to the bottom points of the star there, so they sit in there. Hopefully they won't come out too much. I'm going to apply my glue to the 5 points. This is a hot glue, so I need to act quite quickly with this. Quickly turn this over and press it down. Now I've left my paper, my patterned paper, quite large, and I will trim around it because I know that method of flipping the star over with the embellishments in, it can be a little bit unpredictable. Now I've also just used my hot glue gun just on some of the corners to ensure that the pieces don't fall out, and I've got a really fun shaker card. I can now trim this down to size, stick it onto the front of a card, onto the top of a gift box, whatever it may be, and that is something very different, also using that same die. So we've got the shaker, we've got the 3-dimensional star that's been distressed with mirror card, and of course we're using those points to make our own pattern paper. There's so many different ways to use this one particular die. Thank you everybody, take care, I'll see you again very soon.